Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, back again with Mr. Andrew Erickson to break down rounds 2 and 3 of the NFL draft. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And, we're back. We got more players placed finally after talking about them for months. And, even a few of these guys I think will be, fantasy, maybe not superstars, but certainly relevant here in 2021 and obviously beyond. Andrew, how was day 2 of the NFL draft?
Dude, it was fun, man. We got to see a lot of these receivers find new landing spots. And it was interesting because a lot of the sexier landing spots, just looking at receivers specifically, like the Saints, the Titans, the Detroit Lions, none of those teams drafted any wide receivers. So it's kind of just interesting how things kind of played out. And we'll potentially see some guys going day 4 or day 3 that potentially could have some type of role.
Andrew and I will not be back tomorrow to sum up rounds 4 through 7. Had an article go up a couple of weeks ago where I looked at the draft capital angle of, rookies in fantasy football, and people, over 80% of high performing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends alike are drafted in the top 3 rounds. So not saying we're ignoring those players, but we'll get to them on Monday when Andrew and I do more of a mega pod and we look more at some of the veteran ramifications on top of the players picked. The goal for this pod is just to go through every wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end selected in rounds 2 through 3. We'll try to just make it pretty cut and dry. Are they going to be worth our time in fantasy or not? A lot of guys to get to. I encourage you to go to pff.com, check out our fantasy tracker where we have more thought out opinions on all these guys. And as always, we will continue to inform ourselves better as new information rolls in, as we continue to get smarter throughout this offseason process. It's great to finally be here in the offseason, Andrew. It's been a lot of, wondering for a while. So at least we are finally making that next step. Let's get things started with Ole Miss wide receiver Elijah Moore going to the Jets. Andrew, are you buying Moore as a PPR slot monster in gangrene?
Yes, I think that you should. Again, I already have him kind of in my mental rankings. I think that he'll probably be able to beat out someone or like Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims is going to be on the outside, so he's going to be competing with those perimeter targets with a Corey Davis like player. And look, I looked more. So this Jamison Crowder thing, because it was like months ago that we heard that he was going to get cut from the team and like he just never got cut. So I looked more into his actual contract. So they have a potential out and they can save over $10 million by releasing him. So Jamison Crowder is long gone, I think. And I think that means Elijah Moore is locked into that slot role. And I think that's good for PPR for PPR formats for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be quite as dynamic as it was with Sam Darnold and Adam Gase. We knew Gase with Jarvis Landry, Eddie Royal, even Wes Welker with the Broncos. He's always been feeding his guys. But yeah, it looks like with Crowder, I'm not sure what they're waiting for, man. I'm looking at over the cap right now, and you're correct. They can save $10 million in cap savings, but it's the same if they do it pre-June 1st or after June 1st. So I'm not sure why they've been dragging their feet, but I don't think you use, I believe, the 34th overall pick on a player that you don't plan on starting immediately in 3 wide receiver sets. Man, again, we talked about this yesterday with Zach Wilson. Like, to me, the biggest takeaway with these Jets is just how cheap everyone is right now. I'm curious to see where Moore winds up, because if he just shoots up at the top and we start seeing him priced as a wide receiver 3, but Corey Davis is the odd man out, it's going to be, interesting to see how that falls. But either way, man, this Jets offense and best ball, probably the easiest one to stack, and that's going to remain that way after the draft. The third running back domino fell, only have 4 total, having fallen through 3 rounds. But Javonte Williams joined the Broncos. So Andrew, committee with Melvin Gordon, or is he taking the F over?
He's taking over, man. It's like the Broncos. Look, Melvin Gordon talked about how he was like underrated, and then the team just goes out and trades up to basically draft his replacement. Again, he's going to be a free agent next year. The only other guy on the roster that's under contract now was Mike Boone before this. So they were always in the market to take a running back, and then for them to be this aggressive. Look, Javonte Williams, okay, he's a 2nd round pick, but look, if you look at last year's draft, all those guys went in the 2nd round were basically essentially kind of what the new 1st round is for running back. So again, I'm not going to say, oh, he was a 2nd rounder, so we should look at him differently than a Harris, than an Etienne. I view them all pretty similarly, but yeah, I think that Williams is going to take over.
Yeah. I mean, look, usually the higher you're drafted, the better. But we've seen since 2010, 10 rookie RBs drafted in the first round, finished in the top 24, 8 in the second round, and 6 in the third round. So it's not like, we don't see guys on day 2 getting immediate roles. And yeah, man, I think 2021 Melvin Gordon is a little bit like 2020 Leonard Fournette. I think Fournette will have higher. I think Fournette had higher preseason expectations. He was kind of going in the top 20 picks. I don't think Gordon's going to be there, but that late season DUI, man, still has not been addressed. I don't think, I'd have to look more specifically at Gordon's contract to see what sort of dead cap they'd be taking on if he's out of the picture, but like he was not good last year at all, Andrew, and that's kind of putting it mildly. Obviously, they got rid of Philip Lindsay. They felt the need to add Javonte, and as I pull up the numbers now, they'd be leaving about $6 million in dead money. So, okay, probably not getting cut, but I'm with you. I could see Javonte taking this over sooner rather than later. I'm fine for the Javonte over Etienne takes. I think they're both going to settle in kind of in that bottom of the RB2 range. First instinct, I put Javonte just ahead of Josh Jacobs at like RB23 and felt great about it. I'm still team Najee though. Are you with me there? Najee Harris is the best rookie back so far.
Yeah, I think that, we want Williams and Etienne as those lower end, RB20 to RB24 range. And then Harris is up with RB15, 14, wherever you want, like basically almost a fringe RB1, depending on how things kind of play out with injuries. But yeah, I think it's clear cut.
So next up, Purdue wide receiver Rondale Moore is now an Arizona Cardinal. I think my single favorite NFL draft comp I heard this offseason was from PFF's own Austin Gale, who described Rondale Moore as, I believe it was Calvin Johnson and Cole Beasley's body. So look, he's explosive. I saw him go all over my Buckeyes a couple years ago. Like, I'm not doubting what the guy can do with the ball in his hands. I guess the question is, like, what do the Cardinals think he can do? Because Andy Isabella was a second-round wide receiver in the Cliff Kingsbury, and he has I think, 48 targets through 2 seasons at this point. Obviously, we heard some of the pre-draft reports that some teams even consider him more of a Darren Sproles running back type. Andrew, man, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be soaking up his usual elite target share. Do you think there's enough opportunity for Moore to really put up big numbers in 2021?
I think it just has to do with whether he's healthy or not, because whenever he's been on the field, he gets the ball in his hands and it's all yak. That's basically what he does. I mean, if you look at the 3 games he played this season, he had 11.5 catches per game in 3 games. Like that's absolutely insane. He had over 80 yards after the catch per game in his 3 games that he played in 2020. But that's the thing with him. He just hasn't stayed healthy since his freshman season, when he basically just blew up Purdue as a 18-year-old freshman. He was absolutely insane. I guess I like that he's going to probably play in the slot, because the Cardinals run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. So there's actually 10 times 2 wide receivers in the slot. There is no more Larry Fitzgerald. I don't think this is good for Christian Kirk. I think that means that he's going to retain his field stretching role, which he hasn't really been that good at throughout his career, which kind of sucks for him, because I like Christian Kirk. And I think this is something that you mentioned in the chat that we had going on. It's not good for the running backs, because Moore's ADOT last year was 2.6, which is egregiously low for, that's like a running back ADOT. And that's kind of what we saw from Chase Edmonds, because it's the air raid offense. They use the running backs, near the line of scrimmage, and that could be gone. So right now, Chase Edmonds' RB2 season is on life support.
Okay, it's not the worst case scenario for Edmonds. It does factor into our evaluation, but it obviously would have been far worse if they drafted a true running back. We do need to consider if those same sort of targets are going to be there. I remember like J.D. McKissick was, furiously, at least I was furious seeing the stat, like number 1 in the league by far, and just like screens while lined up in the slot or out wide. Alvin Kamara was up there too. Chase Edmonds sneakily was one of those guys up there. I mean, when they got him the ball, they kind of used him like a Rondale Moore last year. Now with Kenyon Drake out of the picture, will Edmonds just kind of be the RB1? James Conner's out of the picture. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns going on in Arizona. And unfortunately, we have fake sharp Cliff Kingsbury being the guy to figure it all out. So I get it. We got talented players all over the formation, but DeAndre Hopkins lined up as just the Cardinals' left wide receiver on 80% of his snaps last year. We have not seen a ton of evidence that Cliff Kingsbury is able to take all these weapons around. Credit to him for getting one of the few players, in this league shorter than Kyler Murray out there. So maybe that would boost his confidence, no pun intended. But man, I'm not thrilled about this landing spot, man. I wanted Rondale Moore to the Saints. I wanted to bet.
Well, okay. Well, we can agree though, Rondale Moore over Kadarius Toney, right?
100%. That's okay. Maybe my least favorite pick of the draft so far. I think Rondale is fine in dynasty still. I just am not expecting a ton of 2021 targets. Like AJ Green should not play over Rondale Moore, but I think he's going to, because that's the world we live in, Andrew, unfortunately. The Steelers added another tight end with Pat Freiermuth, number 2, really consensus tight end in the draft behind Kyle Pitts. I think this just makes Eric Ebron really a non-viable fantasy option. Again, only Evan Ingram, Rob Gronkowski, soon to be Kyle Pitts have been the rookie tight end ones in fantasy since 2010. I just don't think there's going to be enough volume for Pat. Andrew, are you interested in him as, a dynasty guy? Because obviously, Ebron doesn't really have a super, long-term future in Pittsburgh, at least you wouldn't think. And obviously Pat, at Penn State really did show some high-end receiving chops.
Yeah, he's the prototypical, this is like a normal tight end prospect that's coming in, not a Kyle Pitts, but someone that's really well-rounded. And yeah, Eric Ebron, he's a free agent in 2022. So I think that could be as soon as next year where he kind of fills in that role. There's just a lot of question marks again with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Like, is Juju Smith-Schuster going to be back? Because that's like a big thing. Is Ben Roethlisberger going to be the quarterback? So there's a lot of question marks. So again, in redraft, you're not going to look at Pat Freiermuth for really anything unless there's like an injury or something that happens to Eric Ebron. But I think dynasty-wise, look, man, we talked about this. There's going to be people reaching on running backs because of their names, and despite the fact that they're going to get bad draft capital. You just go with Freiermuth. He's a safe guy that's just going to accrue value because he's a really, really good tight end prospect, but he's just going later in drafts because of the Kyle Pitts hype.
I know a lot of people were disappointed. The Steelers did get a center later, but people wanted, one of these first 2-round picks to be used on the offensive line. I don't have really a reason to believe the Steelers are going to be better on the offensive front last year, other than they can't get a ton worse. Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of the Rams from last year, though, man. I was so ready for that offense to completely fall apart. Their line already slipped from 2017, 2018, and 2019. They didn't add any new resources other than a late round pick. Lo and behold, they had some continuity. Things did get better. So I'm willing to give Pittsburgh a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, I think, than most. As bad as things were, man, they were still a 12th ranked scoring offense last year. I don't think we can just take the last 6-game sample and ignore the good things that happened before. Again, and I'm just going to start turning every Steelers conversation to a Najee Harris tangent, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the league's single worst offense in yards before contact per carry last season. Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, Andrew, I believe you had the stat about them. They were, one of them was an RB2 in a heavy majority of the weeks last year. Obviously we prefer the Steelers have an offensive line, but Najee Harris being projected for over 300 targets, or not 300 targets, my goodness, AJ Brown maybe, being projected for over 300 touches, only 4 running backs to say that last year. And I do think Najee, again, our RB15, RB16 at the moment is going to be creeping in that top 12 sooner rather than later. The Seahawks added to their wide receiver room, Dwayne Eskridge, looking like he's probably going to fill into the slot out wide, maybe not. Tyler Lockett, gets a lot of run inside, but importantly, he kind of seems to offer a little bit more of that horizontal ability there, get him some, pop passes, crossers, moving across the field. He is 24 years old, but man, athletically, this dude is a, kind of joy to look at. Landed on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. 4.33 second laser 40, 350-pound bench, 505-pound squat, 37.5 vertical. Andrew, you buying Eskridge, or is he just more like a great real-life player and probably not much of a fantasy asset?
Well, he's older than DK Metcalf. So that's one of the things that's an issue, just because he's already getting messages from AARP basically because of how old he is. The spot's pretty decent when you look at, he's attached to Russell Wilson. Hopefully he's the number 3 receiver. He's going to have spike weeks here and there, but it's because the offense is so concentrated between DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett that it's going to take an injury for one of these guys for Eskridge to step in. But this is also something that I think Eric Eager has talked about a lot, that the Seahawks needed to add an actual number 3 wide receiver, and Eskridge in that role, I kind of like that in that essence of him being that type of player, because he's really fast. And like you mentioned, it's all the mesh concepts, the drags, he's a yak monster. That's what he's the best at. So I like the fit. And I think that he's a decent kind of guy in Dynasty. He's older, which is not great, but if he gets into the game and Russell Wilson's throwing him the ball, then he's going to be productive.
Hashtag better in best ball, probably going to be someone you want to stack with Russ if you happen to come away with him and the higher end receivers earlier in the draft. Look, I mean, again, I'm high on Chris Carson because they haven't added any running backs to this point. He's going to get fed. This is an offense that has been, publicly adamant about wanting to run the ball more. I just don't know if they can. They quote unquote fixed their defense at the end of 2020. Andrew, their final 6 quarterbacks they faced were Dwayne Haskins, Carson Wentz, a hurt version of Jared Goff, CJ Beathard, Sam Darnold, and Colt McCoy. Before that, they were 28th in points per game allowed. Again, you want to establish a Pete Carroll, that's fine. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that in the majority of the second halves of games they're going to be in. Another NFC West wide receiver, Tutu Atwell, is now a member of the Rams. Bobby Trees, Cooper Kupp, top 2 receivers there. I don't think anyone doubts that. Then we got Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson, Tutu Atwell. This guy is 155 pounds, dripping wet. Andrew, do you really think Tutu can do more than just, supply a couple big plays here and there? Because I just don't think there's many targets to go around. He's going to be like Matthew Stafford's new Marvin Hall. He's going to have like 12 catches on the season, and 10 of them are going to be for 40+ yards.
Yeah, he's going to be the guy that's going to glow up one week and people are going to chase him on the waiver wire. I think that he'll blow up again. And he's just going to do nothing. I think it's an insurance policy on Deshaun Jackson because I think that they're built very similarly. They're both deep threats. So that's kind of what they can do. And it's good for Tutu that he can learn under, basically the expert in his field in Deshaun Jackson. I think that the perfect comparison with him, though, is KJ Hamler. So you look at KJ Hamler. So he's a super explosive slot wide receiver, but he's playing with 2 significantly better wide receivers that are going to command targets. So I think that's the perfect way to look at him. So however you felt about KJ Hamler and how you feel about him now, that's how you should feel about Tutu Atwell.
We need to draw a line on weight eventually. We're going to have like a 125-pound slot receiver that played soccer their entire, man, I remember like playing football in high school and college. It'd be funny because, the season would end, didn't have a ton of playoff success. Okay. Season ends like late November. And when you have that 6-7 month stretch where you're not putting on the shoulder pads, you're not hitting, you start seeing the guys in 7-on-7 in the gym emerge as some of the quote unquote better players, but everything changes once you put the pads on. Obviously, Tutu has done plenty on the field to warrant being selected, this highly in the NFL draft, but 155 pounds, man, I just feel like that's too damn small at some point. So yeah, Deshaun Jackson worked out, but we can't keep comparing every fast, small receiver to Deshaun Jackson. Like D-Jax is one of one. So I just feel like, again, I'm not hit out on Devontae Smith. The more I think about him in Philly, I think he'll actually see a ton of targets and could be a viable guy. But if the weight starts with a 1.5, Andrew, I think that might be where the line is drawn.
Yeah. I think that it's about big play upside, but Atwell before the draft, he was someone so this isn't surprising to me to see him get drafted this all. Like he was generating a decent amount of buzz, but he was someone I put on my fade list for the reasons you just kind of listed off. Like he was super productive in college, which is good. But at the same time, it's the weight that is an issue. I mean, I think pretty sure he actually weighed in at like 149 pounds, like at his actual pro day. So like you're being generous when you give him the 155.
Even freaking worse. I will say this. I mean, it's going to be borderline erotic with Matthew Stafford. We see him just take that big play action, fake, and start looking downfield. That guy's always thrown one of the prettier deep balls in the league. Obviously, Sean McVay was not happy with what they had last year. Goff had one of, if not the lowest deep ball rates in the entire league. We saw that eventually catch up to them. Should not be a problem in LA this year. Panthers got one of the, steals of their draft if he's healthy. He had some issues with the medicals, but LSU wide receiver Terrace Marshall got overshadowed by Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson during his time at LSU, but he was putting up numbers himself. Really stands out, in this small class of wide receivers. I believe he's 6'3", 209, something around there. I guess we can't keep my word for every single weight we're throwing out there after the 2-2 debacle. But Terrace Marshall was a bigger contested catch artist. He made 25 catches on 41 contested targets over the past 2 years. Andrew, I'm just worried about overall targets, man. Again, like Marshall, Tutu, and Eskridge, these guys could all be fine real life assets. But you look at Carolina and you want to draw out your projections, like DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Christian McCaffrey are all going to be projected for more targets than Terrace Marshall.
And then you have the elephant in the room, which is Sam Darnold at quarterback.
Yeah. Like that's we had that too.
It sucks too because like I'm looking at all the weapons. And I'm just like, do I need to move Sam Darnold up now? But it's just like now I'm like getting torn between the Sam Darnold take and because I mean it's filled with weapons like all over the place in Carolina. Like I would love for a quarterback to be attached there, and just it's annoying that they didn't draft Fields. That just would have been perfect. But of course, no, they got to take a cornerback because that's a cornerstone of building a franchise is cornerback to, really lock down, opposing offenses. But I think for me, I guess I kind of looked at it. I was like, yes, okay, the targets really probably aren't going to be there for him. Robbie Anderson's a free agent after this year. So that's one thing kind of looking a little bit more long-term in the situation. Again, Sam Darnold, is he the long-term? We don't really know that either. He's kind of, they picked up his 5th-year option, but we still don't necessarily know what they view him. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater was under contract and now he's gone. So it seems like Carolina's kind of doing whatever they want at quarterback. They're just trying to find a guy that's going to make them work for it. The slot thing is interesting, trying to figure out who's going to play in the slot.
Come on, DJ. Come on.
I mean, that's what I think makes sense, but I think it's maybe going to be a combination of Anderson and DJ Moore. Looking back at 2019 when Terrace Marshall played for LSU with Joe Brady, that's kind of where he was an outside receiver there. Like he played in the perimeter. So that's what I would assume he would play in the NFL, is outside on the perimeter, moving Anderson and DJ Moore back inside. So again, we also haven't really seen Sam Darnold have a lot of success, targeting the perimeter. It's been all of the slot production, whether that's from Gase or not. I mean, that's where the fantasy points have come from. So yeah, this one's tough. I think that dynasty, he's okay still, but year one, you're kind of like, you don't feel great about it.
The slot stuff is good for DJ, but it is just more competition, man. I think we need to have Robbie and DJ right around that wide receiver 2 borderline. We're probably a little bit too high on DJ. We're not high enough on Robbie, and Marshall kind of lowers the ceilings for them each, unfortunately, as again, loaded as this offense is with talent really at every skill position. We had some quarterbacks fly off the board. None are expected to start, but Kyle Trask from Florida went to the Buccaneers. We had Texas A&M's Kellen Mond going to the Vikings, Stanford's Davis Mills to the Texans. So, Andrew, one really interesting thing to come out of today, which not exactly unsurprising, but per Daniel Jeremiah on NFL Network, he said that everyone in the league expects Deshaun Watson has played his final snap with the Texans. So we know Kirk Cousins is the man in Minnesota, at least for next year or two. Obviously, Tom Brady is the guy in Tampa. Any interest in pretty much anybody in this Texans offense? And we'll just kind of lead this into the point that they also drafted me and Jared Evans' guy, mostly Jared Evans' guy. I learned about him from Jared Evans, Nico Collins from Michigan.
Oh man, the Texans, it's a mess. I mean, Davis Mills might start. He could be the starting quarterback. I mean, look, Tyrod Taylor has like this cloud that follows him around that makes sure that no matter what happens, he doesn't start games for more than 1 or 2 weeks. If you look at all like the past teams he's been with, he's always been replaced by the rookie. And it just seems like that's going to be a foregone conclusion with Davis Mills. I guess the only one I like is probably Kellen Mond because he has dual threat ability. Sitting behind Kirk Cousins again. Kirk Cousins' contract doesn't expire till 2023, so he's not someone that you're going to draft in a dynasty league and assume that he'll get some action. I think that he's interesting because he possesses, because of the dual threat, he can flash in a preseason game, which is enough to just gain value. So I think that Mon would be the guy that I would go after. Trask doesn't really offer a lot of value in terms of rushing or mobility, and I mean, he was only really good when he had Pitts and Tony. When he missed those guys in one game and he was terrible.
It was a rough bowl game.
So that's one big concern with Trask.
It is Bruce Arians, though. I mean, if you just look at the best offense for him to maybe develop in, it'd be there. But then again, man, I'm not all that like Bruce Arians was just retired. He just won another Super Bowl with Brady. Obviously, Brady's going to play another couple of years. I'm not so sure Arians has this like 10-year plan with Tampa Bay in mind. So hopefully he can get Trask, playing well. And he did some good things, man. 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions when throwing 20 yards downfield. You can make the case that he's not all that removed from Mac Jones in terms of, just overall upside. But at least in fantasy, people, the guy cannot move. And because of that, we are not going to be interested in him for the foreseeable future. Yeah, with Kellen Mond, man, one fun stat from PFF Eric, our resident PhD. He was 14 of 57 when throwing outside the hash marks, at least 10 yards downfield. That's going to be a sheesh from me, Andrew. Pretty brutal there. The big issue with Mond, man, he has the tools, just really wasn't making the big time throws enough. So, hey, that's the developmental QB you kind of want in the third round. So maybe he figures it out, just not expecting, him to really be a big time fantasy guy in the year 2021. And yeah, Davis Mills, He could start. We also got Ryan Finley in the equation. Maybe Watson is back. Who really knows? Our PFF draft guide pro comp for Davis Mills was Matt Castle. Fairly underwhelming. Just realized only has 11 starts to his name. Former 5-star recruit. Unfortunately, though, like Trask, like Mac Jones, this guy is just not a mobile quarterback. And in that atrocity of a Texans offense, I just don't think that really any of these QBs need to be prioritized in fantasy land. Last thing we're going to talk about the Texans. I mentioned this before. Nico Collins is there. Andrew, here are the wide receivers that Nico Collins is joining on the Texans. Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Andre Roberts, Kiki Cudi, Alex Erickson, Chris Conley, Chris Moore, Dante Moncrief, and Isaiah Coulter. I mean, Nico could be starting in 3 wide receiver sets and see 80 or 90 targets that are not necessarily going to be of the fantasy-friendly variety. We could be looking at a big-time prayer yard player here, but at least in terms of raw targets, man, there could be worse spots for Nico to land.
Hey, man, that's Nico Collins is used to this, man. Like, this isn't out of his range of outcomes where he's used to bad quarterback play. He's a contested catch receiver. That's part of his game. So, look, if there was a particular receiver you're looking for to just kind of soak up just raw volume, it would be Nico Collins. So I kind of like it. I think it makes him way more interesting. It doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. I think that if he can slide into that number 2, which, I mean, looking at the depth chart, it's really not that it's not hard to kind of guess that to happen. Brandon Cooks is there. And again, Brandon Cooks has a history of concussion. So we could be looking at Nico Collins as the wide receiver 1 on a really bad Texans offense that has to throw 50, 60 times a game because they gave up so many points. So I think I'm in on Nico Collins as well.
Preferred best ball strategy so far has been only getting 3 or 4 running backs and just loading up wide receivers. So people, you see Nico Collins sitting there in, the teen rounds or so, don't be afraid to pull the trigger based on volume alone. Andrew, I believe this was one of your guys, but we actually had Tennessee wide receiver Josh Palmer land on the Chargers. I mean, he is going to potentially be in 3 wide receiver sets. We know it's Keenan Allen. We know it's Mike Williams, but I think he at least projects as like a higher end version of what Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson bring to the table. Might not be a guy that's, going to get a ton of consistent targets, but, the way the Chargers run this offense, man, like their number 3 receiver is just a full on field stretcher. And that's exactly what Palmer did in college. 16.6 average target depth. We don't have a ton of production from him, but as truthers like you have stated, the film looks a lot better than what the stat sheet says.
Oh yeah, no, his quarterback play was horrendous. So 31% of his deep targets were deemed catchable, dating back to 2019, which was 3rd worst in this class. And that's the thing. That's his role was a deep threat, and none of his targets were ever accurate. So he couldn't ever really put it together. But his draft stock really rose after the Senior Bowl. PFF in the draft guide, it actually identifies, how they did against man-to-man in the Senior Bowl drills. And that's something he was the best at. So that's something that scouts took notice of. And that's why he went day 2, despite the fact that if you look at his just raw college numbers, you're like, wait, this guy got drafted in the second or 3rd round. Like, how is that possible? But he's got size, 6'1", 210 pounds. And the one thing that he did have that was statistically impressive was end zone targets. He got a ton of end zone targets in his college offense. And that's something that's kind of missing in the Chargers offense because Hunter Henry's gone. So I think that that's really interesting for Josh Palmer. Mike Williams is a free agent at the end of the season. So Josh Palmer balls out, we could see him elevate to wide receiver 2 and potentially, Keenan Allen's getting a bit older. I think Josh Palmer is a really good fit here. And he's someone that I'm going to be targeting a lot in rookie drafts because I don't think a lot of people know about him. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Gabriel Davis last year. It's like Gabriel Davis was a 4th round pick, but nobody was really hyping him up, but he had the decent draft capital. He was in a good offense with a good quarterback. And that's kind of the case here.
Reminds me a little bit of Jalen Reagor in terms of just the quarterback play was what held him back. And fun stat from PFF's Austin Gale, percentage of accurate targets among FBS wide receivers since 2019. We had Jamar Chase at number 6 with 71%, Devontae Smith, number 9, 64%, all the way down at 157. We have Josh Palmer with a 42% accurate target rate.
And now he gets Justin Herbert. It's like, this is what you need.
Can't do much if the ball isn't in your general vicinity, people. Tight end Hunter Long went to the Dolphins. So I was expecting to get, again, I found out who Hunter Long was today. Was expecting to read his draft profile and see, this is a block first guy, nothing to really worry about. Not the case. Apparently, he's nothing special as a blocker. And I'm worried now that he's overlapping a bit with Mike Gesicki. Andrew, should we be out? Should we be selling on Mike Gesicki at this point? We had Jalen Waddle enter the offense. Will Fuller's there now. Obviously, Devontae Parker has been the one to get paid in this equation. I like Gesicki. We haven't necessarily seen him put it all together. And he's one of these guys similar to Parker, whose skill set as, more of a contested catch maestro than this pristine route runner probably meshes better with the departed Ryan Fitzpatrick than the future, which is Tua.
Well, Gesicki's such a weird tight end because he doesn't break tackles.
Yeah.
He's not a yak tight end. And that's usually what we get from tight ends. It's all about the yards after the catch. Like you look at all the best fantasy tight ends, and that's usually the way that they produce. But I don't remember the exact number of missed tackles he's forced in his career, but it's really, really low. And it's kind of almost like comical of how low it is. You're like, how is that possible for a guy that's like a super athlete? Like it's like Zach Ertz-esque numbers in terms of missed tackles. But yeah, that's what I was thinking. I first thought about Mike Gesicki when Hunter Long got drafted by the Dolphins. I was like, look, Gesicki for me, I think is still like on the tight end 9-10 range, just because it's tight end. So like you have to put somebody there. It's tough, but again, you don't really, I think that this is the reason why in your drafts, you want to get Darren Waller. You want to get George Kittle. Like you want to get these guys. And Gesicki has the name cachet where you kind of actually have to invest somewhat of significant draft capital. And you have to take him in the 9th or 10th round, which isn't ideal when you could just take a guy in the 16th round. Yeah. That's probably a better value, or just focus on getting a guy like a Hawkinson, just paying up for him. So really that range of guys is someone that I'm probably going to try to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, why get Gesicki when you can just wait several more rounds, get guys like Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the biggest winner of draft weekend, Anthony Firkser, but more on that in a bit. We had one of the more dynamic wide receivers fall, Dyami Brown, to the Washington football team. Andrew, this is exciting, man. I have a metric I've referenced on here a few times. Playmaker rate, basically take big plays, touchdowns, broken tackles, give them a little extra weight, divide by total touches. He was number 3 among all draft eligible wide receivers from last season, right behind Devontae Smith. 18.4 yard average target depth. So he was getting a lot of those big plays from just kind of the majority of his opportunities being downfield deep balls. But, from our PFF draft guide, Mike Renner has stated that he's confident that he showed enough in his route tree when he wasn't asked to go vertical, that when an NFL team asked him to be more of a pure, just X receiver, whatever you want him to play, he can expand on that route tree. We've seen this, man. A lot of the Ohio State receivers in the Urban Meyer offense, Michael Thomas, Terry McLaurin, even like Curtis Samuel, just guys that just because you weren't asked to do certain things in college doesn't mean you can't do them in the NFL. So I don't know if there's going to be enough targets for Brown to necessarily ball out. But then again, man, it looks like he slides in pretty comfortably right next to McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. I guess this is all to say, holy hell, man, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be fun to watch this year.
Yeah, dude. Dyami Brown is someone that I was really impressed with looking at his numbers, watching him on tape. He is really fluid off the line of scrimmage. He gets open at ease on the outside. And I think he's like NFL. He's like one of the more pro-ready guys in this class. And it's not really surprising to see that he went in day 2. I don't think that he was ever going to fall into day 3 just because he's ready to go. And he fits in really well with the Washington football team offense. He can go on the opposite outside, opposite McLaurin. McLaurin can be more of the possession receiver. He got Curtis Samuel operating more. I think this means also Samuel's probably going to be in the slot then for the most part, because Dyami Brown doesn't play the slot at all. And I think that's probably what we want. We saw Samuel ball out last year when he was in the slot, and I guess maybe the offensive coordinator has learned from his woes of using Curtis Samuel the wrong way the first time around, and he's starting to figure it out. It's like, nope, we're not getting one of these tiny ass slot receivers, because there were plenty of them in this draft class. Could have taken any of them, but he went after a specific guy that's not that a deep threat X receiver in Dyami Brown. Also, too, I think that this kind of hurts Logan Thomas. Again, more pass catchers are going involved, and Logan Thomas was Mr. Volume at tight end last year. So, Logan Thomas, try to sell him if you can.
Yeah. And hey, one of the reasons why before the draft that we were kind of hesitant on going fully in on Ryan Fitzpatrick was because of all the potential rumors of them adding a quarterback. But here we are, Andrew, on May 1st, and Taylor Heineke is still the only person that could feasibly push Fitzpatrick. I think he's looking like a pretty damn great fantasy option, man. He's not the latest of late round guys, but man, if he's still sitting in that QB 15, 16 range, I think by the time week 1 comes along, you'll be surprised when people are going to have him ranked as a legit QB1 in fantasy land. The Packers finally got a wide receiver, we think. Clemson wide receiver, Amari Rodgers. He is a candidate to switch to running back, potentially 5'10", 212. He is a slot receiver. He's not going to play on the outside. I'm fine with this, man. Now, his NFL player comp is Ty Montgomery. I've long hated Ty Montgomery only because he wears number 88. This player is fine. If they use him in that Randall Cobb, slot hybrid, line him up in the backfield, sometimes roll, I think it could be great. Amari Rodgers is a tackle breaker after the catch. Not a ton of contested stuff, but that's fine. You got Davante Adams. You got MVS stretching the field. For now, we got one of the best quarterbacks alive under center. Amari Rodgers, even if I don't think there's going to probably be enough targets for him to put up big numbers in 2021, I think he makes his Packers offense better because they don't really have a player like him right now.
Yeah, man, it's weird that the way that these landing spots ended up turning out, because the guys that I'm most excited about because of the landing spots are Josh Palmer, are Nico Collins, and Amari Rodgers. Three guys I did not anticipate being like, oh yeah, this is the guy that got the good landing spot. This is the guy I'm going to be moving up. But those are the guys that ended up getting into situations where either they have a good quarterback or they have a path to a role on their offense, where some of these guys are just buried on their depth charts. And you're just kind of wondering, okay, well, where's the production ever going to come from? But here you have it, because look, behind Davante Adams, there's just a bunch of guys. And look, Alan Lazard has been the slot guy for the most part, but he's been inconsistent. Amari Rodgers got some draft capital. Alan Lazard doesn't have that. He doesn't. He's got the relationship with Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers hates everybody right now. So really, that obviously changes a lot too. It's but who knows if Davante Adams leaves next year and there's a new quarterback, Jordan Love, and there's a lot of ways where Amari Rodgers can very quickly rise up the ranks in the target pecking order, and they invested in him. So I think that he is well worth a rookie investment for sure.
Yeah, that third round draft capital. Look, man, when I watched Clemson, Ohio State, I actually thought Cornell Powell looked a lot better. He was the one putting up big numbers, putting freaking poor Sean Wade in a blender on multiple occasions out there. I really wasn't all that impressed by Rodgers, but guess what? Rodgers is the third round wide receiver with Aaron freaking Rodgers as his quarterback. This is why we've tried to stress on this podcast, as much as you might love or hate a prospect, we really need to not completely overhaul our opinions once they land somewhere, but at least be willing to, take in the new information and adjust accordingly. RB4 off the board, Trey Sermon to the 49ers. Andrew, I would love this so much more. This is the one scenario where we wish Mac Jones would have been the quarterback that the 49ers would have taken at 3, because if it's going to be Trey Lance season, man, I think we could be looking at a Ravens-Bills situation where we have a committee backfield of guys not getting many targets and they're getting vultured by their QB near the goal line. I think Sermon, as long as his ADP kind of stays, outside the top 100, he's going to be a fine late round RB target, similar in that kind of Gus Edwards type mold. But I think expecting him to, 1, take over from Raheem Mostert, and 2, see anything resembling, consistent 12, 15 touches per game, probably more of a pipe dream, at least for 2021.
Well, he's got a chance because he's got draft capital attached to his name, which Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson don't have. So that's one thing that he has going for him. And that was always my thing with Sermon was, if a team, I remember writing about it, I was like, if a team gives him day 2 capital, I'm definitely going to try to get him in a lot of different places. And I really depends on how the market reacts to this news. Does Raheem Mostert just come crashing down? Does Sermon just skyrocket? Again, it seems like for me, I want to get the guy that's just the cheapest, because whoever ends up getting starts in that backfield is going to be productive. We've seen it, ever since Kyle Shanahan landed there. It doesn't matter which running back is there. They're always productive. McKinnon had games last year. Well, Wilson had a huge game last year. JaMychal Hasty had starts last year, all over the place. But yeah, running backs get hurt. So I agree with you. As long as Sermon's ADP is lower than the other two, then I'm just going to keep scooping him up. I don't hate I think Mostert should still be viewed as the starter, but again, these things can change, rather quickly.
About to say, yes, Sermon has a draft capital, but Mostert, ran for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns in the NFC Championship all the way back in 2020. So I do think he'll still be the starter. Ideally, we get Mostert and Sermon 1-2 punch. We can live with 2 back committees in fantasy football. If Wayne Gallman start getting involved, God forbid JaMychal Hasty. that's when things are going to be a little bit more iffy. So all good news for Trey Sermon. You want Kyle Shanahan to be your play caller. I get that. Just realize with these mobile quarterbacks, as much as they might open up, so those extra lanes with the read options. I mean, J.K. Dobbins averaged 6 yards per carry last year. Gus Edwards is always over 5. If they're not getting 20 carries per game or any targets, it's just a problem in fantasy land. Last few here, wide receiver Anthony Schwartz went to the Browns. Now, this guy is arguably the fastest wide receiver in the NFL now. True track star. I believe his 40 was a 4.27. With that said, I mean, he is a one-hitter quitter. Speed, that's it. Not even sure if he can run routes. Seems like he was more just a gadget guy that, hey, toss him out there for a few plays like a J.J. Nelson, but that's it. Any real interest, Andrew?
Well, again, so it's similar with the Josh Palmer situation where you got Mr. Bo Nix throwing him the ball. Again, Anthony Schwartz was teammates with Seth Williams at Auburn. And that's the thing. Like, they never could take advantage of his deep speed. Like, it was all yak was mostly what he was used for with his speed. But he can, I mean, if you have 4.26 speed, like teams are going to want to use you downfield. So I think he fits really well with the Browns offense. Again, man, it seems like there's a lot of other late round QBs, but I mean, Baker Mayfield is another guy that, again, he was super efficient at the end of last year. Adding in a guy with this type of speed they don't really have part of their offense right now, I think can help them a lot, especially if they move him around in the backfield, because he that's something that's not talked about enough too. He's pretty dynamic. They gave him a lot of rushing attempts at Auburn, which is pretty interesting as well. So, I mean, yeah, the speed is definitely infatuating for sure. And I mean, there have been rumors about Odell Beckham getting traded or cut. So that's kind of an intriguing thing as well. But I mean, he's going to be a role player, so not really fantasy relevant.
He's going to be a wide receiver 5. Expect him to probably be rotating, not even rotating. I think we'll see him like 10 snaps a game, probably with him kind of being one of the focal points of those plays, at least trying to stretch the field deep. Probably already talked far too much about Anthony Schwartz here at 12:41 a.m. Last one, Andrew, tight end. Trey McKinney went to the Chargers. Jared Cook, Donald Parham. We do not care about Trey McKinney. Yes or no?
We do not care about Trey McKinney.
And that is that, everybody. I want to touch on just one more thing here. Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin. They're still alive, people. The Falcons and the freaking Dolphins have not committed to another running back just yet. I will say, there's still some out there. Kenny Gainwell. Who's their North Carolina one? Michael Carter is out there. That's right. Khalil Herbert's out there. There's still some guys where if they go in round 4 to one of these teams, I'm not going to I wouldn't expect Gainwell to go to the Dolphins and take Gaskin's job at this point, or any of those running backs to take their job at this point, but it could cause a little bit more of a committee situation. So not saying it's Myles Gaskin or Mike Davis full-blown 3-down RB season yet, but man, they're big winners. And even Chase Edmonds, again, I do think Rondale Moore is going to eat more into Edmonds' target share than probably any one of the wide receivers. But at a minimum, man, Mike Davis and Myles Gaskin, they're going to be bumping up those fantasy ranks once we get around to updating them.
Yeah, I think that right now they have established themselves as they should both be the top-ranked running backs in their backfield, regardless of whoever gets drafted. So if Kenneth Gainwell gets drafted by the Falcons, it's like, well, who are you going to rank higher, Mike Davis or Kenneth Gainwell? It's probably going to be Mike Davis, because look, none of these every other, like you said it yourself, all these other running backs that go in round 4 and beyond, there's the hit rate is so low that you have to assume that Gaskin's the guy or Mike Davis is the guy. So whether you like it or not. And again, some people are still trying to, this James Robinson, Travis Etienne thing is still going back and forth, because people are coming defending James Robinson. I'm like, guys, it's a fact. It's over. It's just, you have to come with grips with reality here. It's like they spent a 1st-round pick on Travis Etienne. He's going to be the starter. He's going to play. He's going to play more than James Robinson. And then people come back and they say, oh, well, Etienne is Kamara and Robinson is Mark Ingram. And it's like, no, Etienne is both of them, because he has the 1st-round draft capital and he has the talent. So that's the thing. So I don't know.
I said before the draft, I like James Robinson. You like James Robinson. We don't know if Urban Meyer doesn't like James Robinson. Now we know he doesn't like James Robinson because he used a freaking 1st-round pick on a running back. So it's good that Urban, didn't just commit to Etienne full blown. But look, people, like James Robinson was an RB1 because he had more touches than everyone except Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry before he got hurt last year. That is not freaking happening. He's not getting any targets now because they want Etienne to be that guy. And I think it's only a matter of time till those rush attempts go down either. I think Myers, committee talk is more of just coach speak right now. And maybe it is a bit more of a committee to start the year, but I think Etienne will certainly be the guy we all want in our rosters once the fantasy playoffs come around. Andrew, I will say though, Khalil Herbert, I know you hold him, near and dear to your heart. If any of these guys, if any of these running backs, and again, very rarely do round 4 or later running backs do anything.
Jets.
The New York Jets are still sitting there. PFF's own Kevin Cole, great article on PFF.com talking about just teams with the highest opportunity available at running back. And the Jets are number freaking 1 after last year. They added Tevin Coleman to a deal with less than $1 million in guaranteed dollars. Ty Johnson is already a journeyman, even though he's been in the league like 2 years. LaMichael Pirine was a 4th round pick from a different, just pretty much organization last year with what the Jets were doing. One of these guys lands on the Jets. That will be the exception to the rule that you probably shouldn't be taking running backs outside of the top 3 rounds. That's going to do it, everybody. Again, please check out our PFF fantasy draft tracker. We will continue to update that all throughout rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. Andrew, you have some good stuff coming out early next week?
Yeah, man. It's all recapping stuff. Honestly, my brain is so just like befuddled right now. I was trying to ask my girlfriend, I was like, what day is it? I don't even know anymore. I'm just like so zoned out with all the stuff that's going on, whatever. But yeah, just more recapping stuff, winners and losers, talking about potential fantasy breakout stars of the rookies and potential fantasy busts. Again, reevaluating the rankings and taking in consideration. Look, man, like for example, Tylan Wallace, I was a guy I was really high on and looks like he's going to get the day through capital, and that sucks. But I have to kind of take that into consideration. I can't rank him nearly as high as I would have pre-draft because clearly his path opportunity is going to be a lot tougher than I anticipated.
You can go to my just author page on pff.com/analyst Ian Hartitz. I got first round articles on every single skill position player. Again, the PFF draft tracker, and I will have a full-blown masterpiece, fingers crossed, knock on wood, early next week, just based on pretty much every fantasy relevant guy that was selected. But like you, Andrew, my brain is pretty much fried at this point. I spent 6 p.m. to freaking midnight sitting in the same chair at the PFF draft show. Hope you all tuned in, and make sure to check it out again on Saturday and Sunday. We will be back with more there. I think it's Saturday and Sunday. I'm starting to lose track as well, Andrew, but that's going to do it here. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. He's Andrew. I'm Ian. Until next time, take care, everybody.